Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing another tutorial. I'm going to be going over how you can create a background for your colored pencil art. I'm currently working on this Kylo Ren / Ben Solo portrait, so this is the drawing I'm going to be creating a background for. All that I actually have finished so far is the face and the neck, so I do want to start on the background early. I'm going to be starting on it before I work on the hair and the clothing. If you're anything like me, you might be a little bit intimidated by the idea of implementing a background into your colored pencil drawings, just because, first of all, colored pencils are time consuming. Second of all, you don't want to accidentally flatten your work and create like an unrealistic background or something that just doesn't fit in with the rest of the drawing. But another thing is you also don't want to accidentally distract from the main focus of your piece or the foreground. In my opinion, the best way to avoid these background issues with colored pencil work is to just blur out your background and make it look a little bit fuzzy so that it does look like it's a little bit in the distance and you don't take away too much focus from the center of your drawing and the main thing that you want to be eye-catching. One easy and efficient way to blur out colored pencils is to use a solvent. So this is Gamsol. It's an odorless mineral spirit. You can find this at an art store like Michael's. If you don't have a solvent, you can actually use a tissue, a Q-tip, or even a blending stump, a clean blending stump, to just push the pigment of the pencil around a little bit, and you will get a bit of a blurred effect from that. But I do recommend the solvent for getting a fully smoothed out effect. I'm going to go ahead and get into the tutorial, but first I just want to discuss the colors a little bit here. When you're choosing colors for a background, you kind of want it to take into consideration two different factors. So first of all, the context of the piece, and second of all, a little bit of color theory. So what I mean by context is if you're doing a wildlife drawing, I've done a snake drawing before where I showed how I did a background as well. You want to make sure that the background looks natural, or maybe it looks like a blurred out forest or something like landscapey. If you're drawing a fan art like this one, you might want to make a more intense background. The second factor was color theory, so you don't really need to know a lot about color theory, but you can do a little bit of research to see what colors complement each other best, and you can kind of add that. So if you do have certain tones going on in a skin tone, or maybe the outfit of whoever you're drawing, if you are drawing a person, you can kind of include some complementing colors. Choose some colors based on those two factors. That is how I chose these specific colors. This is a little bit of a practice. You might want to do some color swatching practice. I used solvent on this because sometimes solvent intensifies colors. If you haven't used it before, you might not end up liking how it looks unless you test it first. So I've tested it, and since I've tested it, I did find out that this red might be a little bit too intense, so it is kind of beneficial to test it out. As I start to color, the most important thing is to not use too much pressure, so it's easier to color with the side of the pencil rather than the tip of the pencil, and also you want to color in the same direction, so I'm coloring vertically in this case across the entire background so that it all looks even. I'm using a blend here of red, violet, blue, and pink tones, creating gradients so that when I do go out and blend with solvent, it'll be much smoother and easier since I've already blended it out with the pencil a bit. So this whole entire background is going to be a gradient. The bottom portion will be lighter than the top, so I am going to make the bottom a little bit more colorful because the top is mostly just going to be dark blue colors. Also, for my first layer here, it was a bit light, and I could have added another layer of pigment before I went in with the solvent, and that would have helped speed up the process a little bit, but I kind of just left it light before I blended it out. I went ahead and dipped a Q-tip into my solvent and dabbed it a little bit with a tissue to make sure there's not too much, and then I just blended it out vertically the same way I colored. So you can see there's a bit of unevenness there due to not enough pigment, so I'm just going to let that dry. I moved on to another portion, and this is going to be a little bit more of a dark blue with some red violet, and this is going to gradually blend into the dark indigo that's going to be at the very top. So it's definitely a gradient downward. So while you're waiting for one portion to dry, you can go ahead and move on to coloring another portion. That's how I like to do it, so that I'm not just sitting there waiting for one area to dry completely. And then I use a lot of darker indigo blue at the top and blend it a little bit into the other colors. And I'm just trying to get things even because you can see there are some areas that are still a little bit uneven. Then I go in with a Q-tip again, blend everything out. I'm going to go ahead and pause here and show a little update about how this looks right now. So this is what I've got so far. This is how the drawing looks all together. can see how the blurred out effect is very nice. A lot of colors definitely do need to be intensified in a second layer, especially at the bottom here, and the lights need to be worked on a little bit, these little lights. Besides that though, it's good to kind of stop sometimes while working on a background, take a step back, and look at the drawing as a whole. My first layer dried, so I went ahead with some more colors and added another layer of pigment so that I can kind of smooth out some of that unevenness. So you might have to do a few layers, especially even if you're not using solvent, but especially if you are using solvent. I think a background in general, no matter what you're doing, requires a lot of layers. So the top portion dried, I went ahead and added more indigo blue, and now I'm just blending it all out with the Q-tip. Now I'm going in and working on a third layer. Just make sure each layer completely dries before you add any pencil on top of it. You might just have to add as many layers until you are satisfied with it, and I just wanted to create more vibrance and evenness throughout. So I went ahead and did that, and I'm continuing to color and use my Q-tip vertically just so that I have evenness throughout the whole. And then I'm going to move on to the top portion that is going to be a dark blue, a dark indigo color. So what I wanted is a lot of contrast here to reflect the emotions and the state of Kylo Ren in this drawing. So there is going to be a turquoise, blue turquoise color on the right side, compared to the red-violet that I did on the left side. Really, I'm doing the same thing that I did on the left portion. I'm coloring vertically, evenly, and then I'm using the Q-tip to blend in the same way. Here is a fully zoomed out shot so that you can see the progress on the background so far and how it looks with the portrait all together. Please ignore some of this unaesthetic stuff on the side that I didn't push out of the way when I zoomed this out. I also wanted to pause and add a little bit of a note here. So you can see, in contrast to what's going on in the skin tones on the face, even in this zoomed out shot you can see, but the skin tones in the face versus the colors going on back here. So this was what I was talking about earlier when I said that solvent can really help a background look more like a background and a little bit hazy and blurred and out of focus, so that the main focus is on your portrait or animal or whatever the subject of your piece is. I saved the top portion to work on last. I thought that one might be a little bit more frustrating or time consuming just to get the color as dark as I'd like it to get, and that is what I'm working on here, so I'm doing the same thing that I did for the rest. And obviously the lights I need to work on, so I am going to work on the lights as well because the lights are looking kind of strange and they're all different shapes right now, so I will go back and work on that. I'm just going to go throughout the piece and see if there's anywhere where I can even some tones out, and then I'm just doing that. I'm trying to match the color that I got on the left side here with the color in the middle. So I want there to be a smoother blend, and that's what I'm doing here. Sometimes it's difficult with pencils because it's a very small, the pencil is very small where the pigment is, and you can't cover large areas very quickly, so it can be a bit frustrating and time consuming, but it is worth it in the end result. I was able to mix that red violet into the dark indigo and create a much smoother blend at this point. And remember, just don't add any more layers until you have completely dried the layers that you added solvent to. So you don't want to do that because you could accidentally create a mess. This is where I'm going to leave off for now, and I'm going to go ahead and work on the rest of Kylo Ren, so his hair and his clothing. Might need to go back and add more contrast, but I won't really know until I actually finish the rest of the piece and then compare it to the background and see how it all looks cohesively. At this point, I've actually finished his hair, and I went in with my indigo polychromos pencil and darkened up some of the background at the top, so I'm going to leave this portion probably. The last thing I'd like to do for the background after that is kind of color in these lights a little bit so they're not just bright white and they look a little bit more realistic. I'm adding my final touches, including coloring some of the lights at the top a little bit blue so that they're not so bright and white. Then off camera, I actually finished the rest of the drawing, and this is what the portrait looks like all together. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I hope that it was a helpful tutorial. Let me know in the comments what you thought of it, or if you like colored pencil backgrounds, or if you kind of were intimidated by colored pencil backgrounds like I was. Just let me know what you thought. And thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it, and I will see you hopefully in the next video.